Welcome to the Athletic Performance Podcast, a conversation for all things performance related, where we push the boundaries of speed, power, and strength. I'm your host, Ryan Patrick, and we're here to discuss, debate, and enhance athletic development for coaches and athletes alike. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode. This week on the podcast, we have Mike Robertson. Mike is the owner of Indianapolis Fitness and Sports Training and Robertson Training Systems. He's an absolute titan in this industry, and I couldn't be more excited for the interview that you guys are about to hear. Today, we discuss off-season basketball and how he's assessing, thinking, and training athletes at the highest level. We talk about his assessment process, what he's doing now, and how some things have changed and evolved over time. We talk about what I think he does better than anyone else in the industry, to think complex and to program and coach very simply. We go on a little bit of a tangent and talk about how training for youth athletes is about so much more than just sports performance. And last, we talk about how he's using force plates to determine if athletes are elastic or muscular with regards to how they produce power and how that can impact training. If you're a fan of basketball or physical preparation for any athletes, strap in. Mike absolutely smashes this interview, and I know you're going to love it. Please make sure after listening to the podcast, you follow Mike's links and read some of the content that we posted. I think it will enhance your learning and add a whole other dimension to what he brings to the table today. Thank you for listening. Mike, thanks for coming on today, man. Super appreciate this. Huge honor for me. I know I'm just getting this podcast off the ground, so it's great to have guys like you and a lot of my professional friends, if you will, come on and do me a solid. I know you got a lot going on. The last time I came to see you, IFAST was that you had the tarped wall. And yes, I know you're going through a lot of construction. Yeah, I know you're going through a lot of construction now. The timelines are always, it's almost negligent, the timelines they give you and what they actually are. Yes. Yeah. What's happening in your world inside and outside of IFAST?
Yeah, man, lots of good stuff. First off, thanks for having me, dude. I don't go on too many podcasts these days unless I know the host and I know that the person's going to bring the heat. So appreciate you having me on. But yeah, man, lots going on here at the gym. Yes, we have a tarp wall right now. We've been staring at that for about 7 months, but major moves being made. If you follow myself on the IG, there's a lot going on. We're basically partnering and moving in with a basketball group, which works really well for me, considering that's the primary space that I'm working in right now. But yeah, we're going to have a new dedicated space for the gym, some built-in recovery areas, a nice long strip of turf, which we have not had in a couple years. It's 40 yards, but you couldn't run a 40. I always have to put that caveat in there. Nice strip of turf. Bill's going to have a purple room that is of adequate size for him to do his intensives. So yeah, so that's been going on. Once they finish our space, move us in, then they will demo our current space, and they're going to put in a full court, middle school size basketball court, and then 2 half courts with NBA lines, which is very important. If you're in the basketball space and you work with high level players, they're not trying to get buckets on a middle school court. Too little. So that'll be really nice because I'd like for it to be an all inclusive, like one-stop shop for basketball players that are serious about their game and their body to come in, work hard, get better. So yeah, that's what's going on at IFAST. RTS, content train is always rolling, shooting videos, recording podcasts, putting the finishing touches on this program design mentorship. So that group has done very well. And then at home, yeah, man, all good. My wife is amazing. She's a rock star. My kids are 13 and 10. So that's really the only time I feel old is when I start thinking about how old my kids are and looking at them. And I'm like, damn, these guys are really grown up. So yeah, looking forward to spring, right? Cade loves baseball. Kendall is fired up for soccer, spring break, all the things that come with spring. So that's what's new with me, man.
Yeah, can't wait, man. We just had a taste of nice weather, and
I know.
I'm like, I'm done. We're in like the Cincinnati area, so northern Kentucky, but it's just gray all winter long, and I'm just ready for sun, ready for heat, ready to get outside, do some stuff again.
Yeah,
man, it sounds awesome. But I want to dive like head first in today. Okay, so
let's go.
We'll go deep. I want to talk basketball. Obviously, this is the avenue that I've seen you transition to, and I'm really excited about it. I'm a basketball guy. UK basketball. Went to Kentucky. You're an Indiana guy. Like, it's in your blood.
Yep.
But off season's around the corner. And I expect that you're going to see a lot of guys come in just like us. And I am holding on to this one idea is that there's probably no true off season anymore. A lot of these kids are
Right.
going to jump into AAU. So, with that said, what are some of the biggest traps young basketball athletes or even their parents fall into as they make this transition into the off season?
Well, I think you already hit the nail on the head here. It's just there is no off season, right? So for those of you that are unfamiliar with the space, let me give you an idea of what a basketball season looks like now, or what a basketball player's schedule looks like now. Because when I was growing up, I can't, man, trying not to make myself sound dated all the time. You do some preseason conditioning that would start like maybe October, get some open gym in, mid to late October, practice starts. November, around Thanksgiving, your season starts. You play through first week in March. For us, it was always first week in March. We weren't very good, so we get bounced in sectionals. And then you get a little break, and then you go and play your AAU season, which generally finished at that time for us around June. And then you have an off season, right? And even if you played AAU, like AAU wasn't such a time commitment. You couldn't play another sport. So there was a year I played baseball and played AAU basketball. Like I could just do both because that's the way the world worked then. But now I have basketball players that routinely, the second the school year starts, their commitment starts. So they have weights, they have open gym, they have some form of skill development, whether coaches can be involved or not. I don't know how that works anymore. But that goes on until the season starts. And then their season goes November to March at some point in time. The second they're done with their school season, they're transitioning to AAU. And so they're going to go AAU hard and heavy April and May. And then I don't know if they have this in Kentucky where you're at or if they have it in Ohio. Here they do what's called June ball. Now, not everybody does this, but this is the biggest nonsense. And basketball people are probably going to hate me for saying this. But what they'll do is they'll get their high school team back together in June. And let's say we play on the same team. We're going to go to Toledo on a Tuesday. So we're driving to Toledo, the college. We're going to play 4 games in one day. 4. Then we're going to come home. Because generally Toledo wants to look at like one kid, right? They're like, oh, I really like this kid. We're going to recruit this kid. Meanwhile, all the other parents, all the kids are like, oh, Toledo might want me too. Toledo doesn't care about you. Let me just say that. No offense to Toledo either. But you might do that on a Tuesday and then come home. And Wednesday you have off. And then Thursday, you might go to Ohio State. Do the same damn thing. Play 3 or 4 games. So do the math on this, Ryan. I mean, we're talking kids that might be getting 8, 10, 12 games in a week. But the training volume is so dense. So 4 games on a Tuesday, 4 games on a Thursday. So that's June. And then if you're good at AAU, you might go back and play a little bit more AAU in July. So maybe you get 2-3 weeks off and then you're back into your school year, your school season starting back up. It's insane. There's literally no breaks. So my point in all this is that, one, you've got to be sane in this, right? Like just pure common sense. The human body is not built to play 12 games every week, especially 4 games in a day where you're driving 3 to 4 hours to a site, play the games, drive back, take a day off, do it again. The body's not built for that. So you got to find ways to take breaks. Number 2, you got to find ways to actually get your physical preparation in, right? The strength and conditioning, whatever you want to call it. You got to build your body, build some robustness. And 3, you've got to find time to just be a kid. And I think that gets lost in a lot of this, right? These kids are just getting shuffled here and there in skill development and S&C and AAU tournaments. Man, it's such a burden. Like I always try and talk to my kids. Yeah, we talk about basketball because most of them are passionate about the sport. But what else are you excited about, man? Talk to me about music. I'm old. Tell me about new music. What kind of music do you listen to? Let's put it on. Keep me young here. What are you into? What video games do you play? What movies do you like? Just trying to find more about them and get like the human side of them. And that gets harder as you get older. I'm 45. It's a little bit harder to connect with a 15 or 16-year-old, but I think most people understand like good humans. And if you're genuinely interested in them and learning about them, that's valuable. So yeah, that's where I'm at with all this. It's like you have to find time to step away from the game, be a kid, take a break, work on your body.
Wow, I had this conversation with so many parents when they're starting. They're like, "Well, we want to we want to squeeze in one day a week of
Yeah.
physical prep. I'm like, I don't know if that's, I mean, you've got so many things going on. You've got congested competition. You've got competing commitments. I'm like, maybe your kid wants to join a club at school and that's going to
Right.
take up more time and they can't do it because there's so many other demands. But I'm like, let's just, I mean, how do you reasonably fit all this in? Because I'm like, oh, by the way, they're all on TikTok trying to figure out how to navigate the social space as like an awkward 15-year-old.
Yeah.
It's like the challenge just to me seems infinite. And
Yeah.
basketball's the thing I've always thought about basketball guys is no, like ball is life. All
Yeah.
they want to do is play. They always want to be on the court, and you don't really even need anybody to get out there and shoot some hoops. Like
Yes.
pick up football is
It's not a
football's
thing.
gonna yeah.
Yeah.
So the basketball guys are just constant. So
Yeah.
it's
I
just it's so demanding.
I think that's what I keep running into is like you said, there's no such thing as pickup football, right? Or very rarely do you see it beyond like little kids. Soccer, you have to work for a little bit more, right? It's weather dependent. Yeah, you can kick the ball against the wall, but you either have to find somebody or you have to seek out skill development. It's not the same. Like basketball is so unique in the sense that literally any day, anytime you can go out and get buckets or work on your handle. You can always find some way to be working on your game. And so that's where I'm always trying to impress upon the parents and the kids as they start to get older. Hey, man, you got to take care of your body. Your body is like the singular thing here. And if you don't take care of it now, you're going to have problems when you get older.
Yeah, that's I mean the foresight for a 15-year-old. You know what
Yeah,
I
I
mean?
know,
It's
right?
like
It's
they're
hard.
still procrastinating on their homework, let alone like
Yeah.
worrying about my joint health in 10
Yeah,
years.
I know. I
Uh,
know.
all right. With all that said, I know this could be a tome. It could be an entire encyclopedia, but give me a simplified version of of what this process looks like for an athlete who actually needs to do the off-season training, who
Yep.
needs the physical prep. Because to my way of thinking, playing basketball obviously is going to make you better at the sport. There's
Yep.
strategy, there's tactical things that go into that. But preparing your body to be physically dominant and robust is low hanging fruit, I feel like, for a lot of
Yeah.
these athletes. So, what does this process look like for you amidst the chaos?
Yeah. So I think it all starts with really trying to understand the kid, their strengths and weaknesses, um, honing in on both of those things throughout this process, right? Hey, you're already an amazing finisher, right? You're already an amazing shooter. So, like, highlighting their strengths and then, okay, this is great. It's just like any sort of evaluation, right? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your rate limiters? And so that's what I always try and hone in on is like, hey, look, let's continue to maximize your strengths. That's what makes you who you are. That makes you great. But let's minimize these rate limiters so we can get you more minutes or get you to the next level. The one thing that I've always tried to do throughout my career is associate and work with people that are on a path of some sort, right? So the person that has no path, no real motivation, they're not going to work well with me. So I just generally don't work with those people. It's like, hey, it's the kid that's in high school and wants to play in college. The guy that's playing in college wants to be a professional. The guy that's a pro that wants a second or third or fourth contract. Those are the people that I work best with. So it starts with here are your strengths, here are your weaknesses. How can we level those up? How can what I do help improve your weaknesses? So maybe it's pure speed, maybe it's your vertical jump, your power, your explosiveness, your ability to stay on the court. So I start to talk in those terms, right? Hey, you've had this persistent knee issue. Or hey, you don't have the juice. I have these numbers. You don't have the juice to play at the next level. How can we help you do that? So it starts there with this discussion and then diving in and really figuring out under the hood what's going on. And that's where kind of our assessment process comes in. That's evolved a lot for me personally. I still do the posture photos and all that good stuff. I do some table tests. We do a full, I don't want to even call it a movement screen. It's really just like a on the fly test of what can and can't they do. So I know, hey, day one, this kid can goblet squat, they can front foot elevated split squat, they can do a push up on the ground. And then the final piece is like the force plate type testing. So we can really understand like the machinery and the hardware, what's going on, what do they do well, what do we need to work on from that lens. But that's how we do it. It's twofold. It's talking to the athlete, figuring out what they're good at, what they're not good at, trying to tie some context into all this, and then help them understand with the assessment, okay, here's what we found with the assessment. Here's my plan and my vision to help you get to where you want to go.
I think anybody who's on a path can appreciate that, right? Because
I hope so.
It's like you got to get clarity, I think, not about just where you want to go, but where you're actually starting from, right? So the old analogy is like the roadmap, right? If we're in New York and I'm trying to go to Chicago, I don't want a map that takes me to Miami.
Yeah.
But I'll admit, we still use posture photos.
Yeah.
We still use like basic
value.
movement screens.
Yeah.
I mean, and I tell parents, I know they can dunk. I know they can posterize some kids and that's all great, but speed can mask a lot of deficiencies in some cases. And I just want to see how these athletes move in a low speed, low fatigue, low strength situation. What are they actually showing me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I find is that whether we're looking at their movement, whether we're looking at their posture photos, we're looking at the performance tests, a lot of times the issues that they have, it's very easy to tie something that we find in our assessment back to their deficiencies, right? So the kid that's always got anterior knee pain, well, look where your center of gravity is. Look at this twist that you have through your knee. Do you think that could be causing some of this? So whether it's that or the guy that's like, hey man, my first step is great, but man, I suck at finishing. And you watch a little bit of film and you're like, well, that's because you are all gas pedal and zero brakes, my friend. And then you look at their rebound jump test on a force plate. And you're like, oh, wow, well, your braking absolutely sucks. So here's just another thing that's showing, yes, what you're feeling, I'm seeing. Now let's come up with a plan and a strategy to help move you from A to B. So you've got better brakes, you can become a better finisher. Or, hey, here's the program that we're going to use to untwist your knee, right? Make sure it's more, don't let Bill hear me say this, it's more of a hinge, right? You got to talk their terms. They don't want to hear about a condyloid knee joint. Hey, let's make this more of a hinge, right? Because it's not supposed to have that twist there. So let's untwist it, let it relax. Now, hey, what's cool is you're probably going to jump higher too. Knee feels better, you jump higher. Most people are on board with that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that still gets lost on the kids and even the parents is they're looking for the next best program, right? Who's got the best vertical jump program?
Yep.
And I'm always really cautious to say high level athlete does not necessarily mean you have to do anything fancy or extreme in our domain.
Yeah. So I was going to write this down. I've had a couple interesting instances here lately where some people are like, oh, we need a bigger vertical jump, just not jumping high enough. But then I show this kid's vertical jump compared to a lot of pros that I have. And this kid's in high school. I'm like, not that far off, right? So that tells me, hey, this is not just a pure vertical jump thing. If we're talking explosiveness, that's a different story. What do you mean by explosiveness, right? If it takes him a second to cycle through a vertical jump, maybe that's the issue. It's not the jump itself. It's how long it takes him to get off the ground. So it's things like that. Or I've got other athletes that are not powerful or explosive by any metric, but then you watch them on a court and you're like, damn, this guy's like really fast though. Like, how is he able to be elusive and escape and create space from these really like high level defenders and really athletic defenders? Well, they understand pace. They understand leaning on somebody, creating separation, using their body. Nobody's going to sit here and tell me Luka Doncic is the most explosive athlete on the court, but damn, that guy can use his body. He understands pace. So there's a lot of ways to be a better athlete and a better basketball player. And again, that's where it comes down to identifying your strengths. If Luka was trying to play like, I don't know, Jalen Green or somebody else that's just crazy explosive, he's not going to be successful. He figured out what to do based on his strengths and his skill sets to make him the best player.
Yeah, it's funny. I communicate with parents a lot. I'm like, hey, if we do this with your kid, they are going to get more athletic. They'll increase their strength. They'll jump higher. They'll break better. Their first step quickness will change. I'm like, but if they're not good at basketball or they don't understand the game, they're still just a body out there. Like, running around just a little bit faster, probably wearing themselves out a little bit more.
Yeah.
There's just an element of some people just got it.
Yeah. Some people got it. And I think this is where it's very easy. If you think strength and conditioning is the Wild West, I think skill development in sports is even worse, because you could just play any given sport, right? Baseball, basketball, football, soccer. And based on that criteria, you can be a coach for that sport, right? There is no credential, at least that I'm aware of, to be a basketball skill development coach. So this is where, if you're going to work in this space, if you're going to have a kid in this space, physical preparation, but yeah, you got to have a skill development person, and you got to make sure that person understands the game. Because just like any personal trainer can go out and make somebody do walking lunges for an hour and they'll be sore the next day. Hey man, I could take some kid out in my backyard and just put them through the meat grinder, right? Handles, finishing, all that. They feel cooked at the end of a session, but did I really make them better? And that's where I think a good skill development coach is going to help somebody understand, hey, this is the game. This is what you bring to the game. This is how you can put your stamp on it, how you can have an impact. And I'm lucky because I've got Joey Burton was here for many years, Scott Romaniuk. I've got great skill development coaches here that I've worked with that understand not just the physical prep side, but how to really develop an athlete and develop a basketball player. So that's where, absolutely, like you said, you could be the best athlete. We've both seen it, right? Guy that has all the God-given gifts but doesn't understand the game or how to get his shot off, or like subtleties, they're not going to be successful.
Yeah, I think you'll appreciate this because a lot of the physical prep in our area, so a lot of our like local market competitors, it is very much this grind culture.
Oh yeah.
It's large groups, kids getting smashed. And it's one of those things where it's like when you have a lot of people, there's going to be some outliers, some people who it's kind of, it reminds me of like the Russians, right? They just ran everybody through the meat grinder. The genetic elite emerged. And what I see is it's like success has many fathers, but failure's an orphan. So it's, I know there are kids in these programs who got cut from the team, but you don't hear about them. And I don't hear about their lack of results. I just hear about all the ones who are there. And it's almost like they can use this to excuse just, it's almost like the hard work just covers a lot of deficiencies in terms of applying knowledge and just sound logic to how you're developing a young athlete.
Yeah. So, interesting tangent. Years ago, I shouldn't have gotten this gig, but I got to be the bench press, an assistant world bench press team coach for Team USA. And you're surrounded by the best bench pressers in the world, right? It's the US, China, Russia, Bulgaria, countries I've never even heard of, right? And so at the end, I was talking with this Russian guy. He's 181. I just remember him in the back, like literally warming up with 405 cold for reps. Holy crap, this guy is strong. And so I was talking to him at the end of the meet. And I'm like, dude, how did you get into this sport? And he's like, well, I was an Olympic weightlifter originally, right? Because that would be the pinnacle as far as weightlifting goes, or like strength training sports in that culture. Well, I was a weightlifter. And normally I would be if I wasn't good enough at that, I'd go to be a power lifter. But I hurt my knee in Olympic weightlifting. So the only thing I had left was bench pressing. But that's like the culture, right? Like you said, you miss the thousands of bodies that are left in the wake to get the one Olympic champion. And that's how a lot of this stuff is these days, right? Like you said, it's like, oh, let's just put them all through the meat grinder. And then the one that survives, we're going to put them up on a pedestal. Versus, hey, let's look at all these kids. Let's individually treat them, right? Train them, and then help them all maximize whatever gifts they have. And again, that's a small batch thing, right? That's not your Folgers cup of coffee for everybody, right? This is small batch. That's why what we do is a little bit different. It's a little bit unique, but man, that's it for me. Like, I want to give any kid, any athlete I work with the best chance for success. So that's why there's such a focus on individualization. And hey, this is what you really need to be successful versus, hey, here's the whiteboard workout of the day. Everybody go do this. Make sure you leave in a pool of sweat and you limp out of the gym. It's just not how I do things.
Oh, just rolling my eyes so hard. Well, I mean, I think it's the reason we've pivoted to athletes need more individual stuff, and I don't think a lot of people who are strength and conditioning coaches listening to this are going to like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think we can definitely make an impact on an athlete, but I think our role in their overall success is very marginal.
Oh, for sure.
We can keep them healthy, we can make them more athletic, but when you talk about sporting success, there's so many factors that go into it. But I feel like this field and a lot of people are quick to just exalt their own influence
Yep.
and what they do for athletes. And a lot of times I think it's very, very overstated.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Look, I'm very cognizant of the fact now that like Roy Hibbert was an all-star before I ever trained him. All right, he was a really good basketball player before I ever touched him.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Glenn Robinson had already won a dunk contest before I ever trained him. So yeah, I'm going to put up a video of him jumping because it's freaking amazing to watch. But you know what? My dude touched 12-4 when he was at Michigan. So it's, again, I can't take credit for that. All I can enjoy really, and part of this is just wisdom. I hate to call myself wise, but 24 years in, I think I've accrued a little bit, right? It's removing your ego from the equation, which is hard. If you're 5 or 10 years in and your ego's still tethered to your athletes and your coaching, that's okay. That's normal. But yeah, 20 some years in, I've just realized like it's just not about me. It's not about me. It's about the kids and the athletes that I work with. It's about taking care of them. Yeah, putting them on a pedestal in the sense that they have worked really hard. I don't care how gifted you are physically. If you're playing in the NBA or Euro League or at a high level Division I school, you've worked really hard to get there. You're not just resting on your laurels. So kudos to them, but you're absolutely right. We can't sit here and just constantly pat ourselves on the back every time they have some success. It's okay to enjoy in it, right? Because we've been a part of their journey. Just please don't think that you are the sole reason that they've achieved success, because that's kind of a narcissistic way to look at things.
Yeah, it's tough. It definitely gives you a lot of street cred working with the high level athletes. But
For
I mean,
sure.
to your point, it's like the Bengals guy that we had, Travion, he led the SEC as a junior, like before I even met the guy.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
So I feel like our role is to give him the best long-term opportunity, right? Health is a huge concern for these athletes because if they're playing a lot as kids, they're playing even more as pros. The NBA offseason is like half the length of the regular season.
Yeah.
If the series go to the 5-7 games.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. But I want to keep pushing this conversation down the road a little bit. And I think we've talked a lot about just developing the offseason athletes and your approach to this. Over the last 1 to 2 offseason, have there been some new ideas or influences that you're baking into what you're already doing?
Yeah. One of the things that I've definitely tried to lean more onto is the idea of just general well-rounded strength. And I don't mean in the sense of putting a barbell on their back and back squatting them, but so much of what they do on a court is plyometric. It's so elastic in nature. So giving them some of that foundational, just low-level strength, connective tissue rebuilding, like taking a month or two right off the bat, if I have that amount of time, to just redevelop strength as a physical quality, right? And strength without the presence of the stretch shortening cycle, I think is really valuable. So if you came in now, initially, probably that first month, we dive right back into like speed work and your classic R4 reactive, Lee Taft influence stuff. A lot of times now, especially with my higher level athletes, that first month, man, we're dragging sleds. Slower, heavier, finding foot contacts, reverse sled drags, lateral sled drags, getting them out of their shoes. So some of this really foundational stuff, we're going to always emphasize rebuilding their movement patterns and restoring some movement options early in their off season, because we know so many of them get pushed forward. So how do we recapture a more stacked center of gravity? We're going to start really super basic. And I know you talk about this all the time, but it's not sexy that first month when you're talking about, oh, what are we doing today? Reverse sled drags, heels elevated goblet squats, push-ups, maybe push-ups with a down dog, front foot elevated split squats. These are not the sexiest Instagram reel highlights, but man, they get people moving and feeling good. And I need that first month. That's what it looks like almost across the board. Once you get into high school, college, pros, if you're a high enough level athlete and if you've got some outputs and some juice, you're getting pushed forward. So I got to bring you back. So we generally start there. Something that I'd been trending towards for a while, and I'm putting a bigger emphasis on it now, is what I would call just like modified max effort strength work. I don't need straight up power lifters honeymooning as basketball players. We need some strength, right? And I think, again, there's value to having some of that low end strength development, maybe even not in the sense of using it as an output, but for resiliency purposes, rebuilding connective tissues, making sure the muscle tendon complex is strong. So we're going to do that a lot of times in that second block. And then when we get to the end and second and third blocks, I'm using a lot of flywheel stuff. I realize not everybody has access to a flywheel, but everybody and their mother's talking about braking. And I feel like this is just a great way to recapture some really good braking without necessarily the chaos of being on a court. And that's the way I always describe it to my athletes, is everything that you do on a court, I want to be able to do with you first in a controlled environment. So your really hard downhill drive that turns into a lunge stop, well, I want to do that first, either with band resistance or a split squat or a lunge variation, right? I'm always just trying to reverse engineer these patterns. So we can do it in a controlled environment and context first before we get on the court, and you're trying to do it at speed or, with an immediate stop start because you're reacting to a defender or an offensive player. So I think those are some of the big things that I'm thinking through at this point. I think the big rocks are there. Like, I feel really comfortable with the system, and maybe it's just me wanting to tinker all the time. I don't want to get bored with it myself, but it's just constantly trying to tweak and refine how I do things. And I think those are some of the biggest changes that I made in the last 1 to 2 years, is just making sure we get them out of their shoes, get them shifted back, recapture center of gravity, relative motions, whatever you want to call it, foundational strength, connective tissue prep, and then training like braking, and just making sure that we're tying all those pieces together in a controlled environment before it becomes chaotic.
Yeah. If it looks right, it flies right. And some of these guys, their well is so deep, like just giving them more access is just going to expose them to utilizing more of the athleticism I feel like they already have, that we've already talked about, right?
Yeah. I always think of it, look, some people are born with the gifts to play in the NBA, right? Glenn, I'm sorry, he had the gifts, right? Like, most people don't touch 12-4, training or no training. But then it comes down to, okay, now how do I keep that guy healthy for as long as possible? And I think that's where the mindset shifts. Is I think of it as a bell curve. So when somebody's just getting started, I'm trying to give them the outputs necessary to play at whatever level they want to play at. Once they've achieved that, now the game has changed. Now it's about maintaining those outputs for as long as possible and making sure we have the resiliency and the robustness underneath them to where they're available to do that on a consistent night in, night out basis. So it's pretty simplistic, I think, but that's the name of the game. Is if you don't have the juice to play at the level you're at or the next level, you need to fix that first. And once you have that, then it's okay. That's great. But if you can only play 50% of the games, you're not going to be very successful. So now you have the juice. Now we have to make you resilient and robust enough to be able to last and continue to play.
Yeah. We talk about that with some of our athletes. Hey, there's certain physics that need to happen for you to be a collegiate athlete.
Yeah.
Like once you're in the ballpark, you're good to go.
Yeah.
And then after that, the whole maintaining this, it's always like my slow kids don't pull hamstrings. That my guys who don't jump high don't have jumper's knee or tendinopathies. Right. So you do have to manage this stuff because it's the drag cars that break down. And I don't think people appreciate. We think of force as mostly strength. I think that's the pedigree we've got, but you don't realize how much force is happening on a guy who's jumping and touching 12-4. Like the magnitude of that is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. When you start to get under the hood and you look at the performance metrics, I think that's one thing that really started to evolve my thinking after a while. Is you can't tell me these guys aren't strong, right? You can't tell me a guy that can touch 12-4 isn't strong. It's just the context and the lens that we were looking for to define strength was irrelevant. right? Like the weight room is not the place because that's not contextual to him. Also, the things that make him great on a basketball court make him trash in a weight room. Now, I will say this, Glenn moves really well. So if Glenn ever listens to this, my guy, you are a savage. You move great in the weight room. But just being realistic, right? If you've got this long, lanky string bean that can bounce out of the room, they're not going to be great in a weight room. Kevin Durant. I've never coached Kevin Durant, but I would imagine, he might move pretty well because he's probably trained a long time, but he's not naturally the best guy to have in the weight room based on his levers. But you know what? His levers make him a damn good basketball player. So that's where you have to kind of like make sure that your evaluation and what you're using to base your criteria off of, I don't know if I'm saying this very well. There's a reason powerlifters like strength stuff because they're good at it and it's contextual to what they do. A basketball player, if their only way of contextualizing their strength is putting a barbell on their back or having them bench press or trap bar deadlift, I would say that's not the best kind of A to B comparison. You got to find ways to contextualize their strength without having technique involved. And that's where I think you're seeing all of the jump testing come in, all of the isometric testing come in, because it's not technique dependent. How many years did you barbell back squat before it felt really comfortable to you? Probably a lot. And you're a pretty good squatter.
Was decent. Not so much anymore, man. Trying to hold on to that athleticism.
I get it.
I went to the Elite Fitness compound in it's like 2006. I was still in college. So I know you were there a couple times.
Yeah, I went there a couple times. Yeah.
So for those listening, if you don't know about it, Elite Fitness was a big powerlifting community. They sell a lot of equipment, but they had this random warehouse in London, Ohio, which is outside of Columbus, the middle of nowhere. And it was one of the most savage places you could ever walk into. Just amazing equipment there. The wall was just plastered with photos of guys who have been there, powerlifters, record set, and the environment was just insane. But they had a seminar, and I remember Alan Cosgrove was there. So it was like one of the first times I really got to meet him. And he came in, and one of his slides was, "What is strong?" And he had a picture of a powerlifter. He had a picture of a martial artist because he was a taekwondo guy.
Yep.
He had a picture of a gymnast doing an iron cross where they're hovering on the rings. He's like, none of these guys can do what the other one's doing. So how are we really defining strength? And that thought has sat with me forever because this field is it's driven by guys who love the weight room or maybe excelled in the weight room. And it did a lot for my athleticism, but going from a 200 to a 400 and 500 pound squat did not help my vertical.
Yeah. See, but that's the rub, right? Is like, number one, a lot of times this industry is filled with people that weren't good enough to play the sport. So we moved into coaching the sport. So I wasn't good enough to play basketball outside of high school. So now I coach basketball players that are like 10 times better than I ever would have been. Right. So but the weight room, it actually, for me, actually did help my vertical a little bit because I think I was just underdeveloped force wise. Hey, it's amazing what happens if you get a little bit of strength underneath you. You focus on power development a little bit. You actually like train hard for a consistent period of time. I don't think it takes that long. I think most guys and girls between high school and college, if they're in a good program, 3 to 5 years of really sound strength and conditioning, that's probably all you need to develop the outputs necessary to play your sport. Because part of it is just inherent, right? It's baked in. If you got it, you got it. Now we just need to train a little bit to maximize it. Yeah, I don't think you need 10 years to get to your physical peak to play a team sport. Powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, those are different ball games. You can continue to get strong for a long time. But
yeah, so we can make any athletes faster. I think speed can be taught. I think it's very difficult. I think jumping also. But one thing I am certain about is I am not going to turn a tortoise into a hare. No. Training is not going to turn you into Tyreek Hill or Glenn Robertson.
I wish. Yeah. And this is where too, unfortunately now you can just look at some kids and you're like, man, I'll give them everything I can, but you can also look at the kid and then look at the parent and get a feel for, okay, this is where we're going to end up, give or take. hey, I'll do everything that I can, but I also, like you alluded to, I'm not going to take you, kid that looks like a pylon, and turn you into this person that looks like a yield sign. You just don't. You don't have that baked into your genetics. Sorry.
Yeah, you're not going to be taken off from the free throw line, but maybe you can play a game like Luca, play to your strengths,
Yep.
which some kids don't want to
Exactly.
hear, right? They watch Steph Curry or whoever else, and that's the person they want to be, and
Right.
maybe it's just not in the cards.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
Yeah. And that's where, real quick, that's where, like you said, you either help them understand, okay, this is a better way, maybe based on your body type and the way you move, this is a better use of your game. This is also where, too, maybe unpopular, but I'm also trying to help parents understand what we're doing here isn't just for sports performance. This is going to help them the rest of their life. I'm going to help them take care of their body. And so sometimes when you tie in those two messages, and it's not just about, hey, making the team or increasing their vert 2 inches, it's, hey, I'm going to teach little Johnny how to take care of his body for the next 70 or 80 years of life, that this resonates and hits a little bit harder.
Yeah, the last thing I want is for a kid to feel like what we're doing is punitive.
Yes.
And just graduate high school, their athletic career is over, and then they just despise training and improving their body. And I've told a couple kids, we had this one guy, he was, I don't know if he ever ended up moving forward with this, but he came to me, he's like, I want to try to walk on at this school, and, what do you think? I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm kind of looking at him at the time. He was overweight. He'd been out of high school for a year, hadn't really been doing much. And I had just this really honest conversation with him of, are you prepared to work for this harder than anything you've worked for in your life? And he's like, yes. And then I followed up and I'm like, are you prepared to do this and not make the team? And he sat there for a minute, really thinking about it. And he said yes. And the kid worked his tail off. And I'm like, well, that's great, because if you are, you're going to get so much more out of this than a jersey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's just so powerful, but I think it's often missed. But a lot of the reason I got into this too is because confidence, motivation, seeing the results. Like, you can't do much about talent, but you can see who's actually putting in the work inside the gym.
Absolutely. Goal setting, teaching somebody to set a goal and actually work for it. You can talk about outcome. That's the great lesson, right? Outcome. Can't always control the outcome, but you can control the process. So there's so many things you can tie into that. And I think that's one thing that I always took away from sports and the weight room was, man, there's just so many opportunities for personal growth and so many life lessons that you can learn from being on this journey. It's not just about, hey, squatting or deadlifting X amount of weight or making this team. If you really buy into it, it's like, hey, man, you learn a lot along this journey. And if you really buy into the process, you can take a lot away from it.
100%. Well, Mike, I don't know if I really want to touch this topic that I'm about to bring up, but I'll backpedal first and say, your complete coach cert, your thought process in general, you are absolutely one of the guys who I think synthesizes a lot of information into a very cohesive, digestible format.
Thank you.
And there's a lot of complexity out there, and it can be confusing, and people can start trying to do multiple different things. And it's almost like they're stitching together this garment of just a bunch of different patches. And sometimes it just gets really disconjointed.
Right.
And I think we've already mentioned Bill a little bit. We just talked about the pylon and the yield, and this topic is so vast. I'm seeing a lot of like second, third hand people start to talk about this, and it's clear there's not a comprehensive understanding. And I don't know that I have a comprehensive understanding.
Yeah.
I try to channel everything through you. But I do want to touch on Bill's influence on your thought process. And I think from just like a 30,000 foot perspective, what are some of the big levers that you're able to pull in training, or what has really been impactful from you from his model as a whole?
Yeah. Well, first off, shout out to Bill, man. He's such a savage, and it's got to be frustrating. I try not to bother him about it, but I'm sure it is frustrating because there's a lot of people that are literally trying to just take his model and reproduce it as their own. That's not cool. Being influenced by somebody and giving them credence and credit for that, absolutely. Like, that's how the industry evolves, but it's also what people really want to know isn't what you've learned. They want to know about your experiences. So if you're going to talk about Bill's model, talk about how it works, how it shaped the experiences that you've had, and how you've then used it, right, with your own people. So I think that's really important to know. As far as influence, man, it's hard to just, we're so tethered together in so many ways, even though we don't work together nearly as much now, just because we both got our own things going on. It's almost impossible to unwind because so much of the stuff that we've worked on together collaboratively over the years is just kind of like baked into me. But I think one of the biggest things that I've taken away, and that's what's really helped me, is things that I saw for many, many years, right? Somebody that's really anterior weight shifted, anteriorly oriented through their pelvis. They've got twists through their knees. Bill really helped me get clarity on why that happens. And I think we can, in a lot of cases, we can get caught up chasing whys, but I think he's got better whys than anybody else. And if you got a good why, it helps you understand why it's happening, and then you can understand better solutions to fix it. So for me, something that I had done for a lot of years was, okay, we're going to do anteriorly loaded exercises. And we just knew, oh, hey, if I front squat versus back squat, this person sits down easier, they've got more depth, it looks better. Well, now we understand, oh, well, that shifts their center of gravity back. It allows the muscles on the back side of their body to relax. Now they can actually demonstrate some of that flexion through their ankles, their knees, their hips. And almost universally, we can say most athletes need to do a better job of that, right? If they can triple flex, that unlocks and uncoils their ability to triple extend. So stuff like that. But then it's taking that and, okay, but how does this look and manifest itself in a program? Well, we talked about sled drags. Think about that first block of off-season training. Most athletes come in, they've been stressed, right? They've been using all of those muscles on the backside of their body to drive downhill, to jump higher. Well, we need to shift them back so they start to distribute that force, because generally when they come in, their ankles hurt, their knees hurt, right? Their hips or their lower back hurts because they're pushed forward all the time. They've lost some of those movement options. So now we know, hey, we're going to have you drag this sled backwards. We're going to do some heels elevated goblet or 2 kettlebell front squats. We're going to do some front foot elevated split squats, shift your center of gravity back. Like some of those things I was already doing, but then the explanations behind, oh, this is why this works, just gave me more credence and helped me better understand it. So now I can get even more of that in, because you alluded to this up top. Let's say I've got an NBA or an overseas basketball player, I may only have 2 or 3 months with them. It's not a lot of time, and I don't have time to make a lot of mistakes. So that first month, everything we're doing is designed to shift their center of gravity back, right? It's like this atom bomb of, hey, we got to restore movement options. We got to rebuild connective tissues, make sure you're moving and feeling great, because that's just the first block. The next 2 blocks, I have to actually develop some strength and develop some physical resiliency, because you're going to go back to the league, or you're going to go back overseas for 8 or 9 months and play your sport. So I think that's probably one of the biggest influences, is just really understanding like what we're seeing, why we're seeing it. And then that just allows you to be so much more targeted in your solutions and in your training interventions. I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. And I try and give him credence every time I can. I don't know if it'll ever be enough. And it's hard because, like you said, just it's so tied into the way I think. Unless I would reference Bill Hartman with every thought that I have. It's like Bill Hartman, Lee Taft, Joel Jameson, right? Because Bill is my movement model. Lee is my speed and agility, quickness type model. And Joel was very influential in my conditioning model. So it's like whenever I talk about those topics, I have to lead with, this is the guy that kind of framed this, gave me the model. And now what I'm going to talk to you about, if I'm going to talk about movement or speed or conditioning, it's through the lens of this person gave me the model, gave me a filter. Now here's how I've taken it and applied it, made it my own.
Yeah, that's so refreshing, because there's so many commercially available movement models, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago was the FMS. And there was always like these things that kind of fell outside of the umbrella. Well, why doesn't this thing fit into this model? And then PRI came along and it was able to explain and account for more of these nuances. But then you hit a roadblock with certain things on that. And to your point, I just feel like Bill cast the biggest net in terms of being
Yeah.
able to explain things that we're seeing. But again, like here's where it's that I appreciate you is that you're able to simplify. Like, it's not changing training a whole lot. Like it does give us
Right.
some new insights, maybe some small decisions or modifications, but overall it's reinforcing the things that are valuable. But again, just accounting for that level of nuance so we can understand what's happening to just much greater depth.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got these old posture photos from two of my MLS soccer players. This is probably 11 or 12 years old now. And just staggering, I'm going to sound really conceited here, but like staggering changes in the improvement of their posture photos over the course of whether it was a year, 2 years, whatever. So really pat myself on the back for that one. But this is before we had the model, right? Or before maybe we were just very like dipping our toe into PRI. This was just training based interventions. And so now to just think about, okay, we are having that level of success. Now we're even more refined. We're even more targeted, better understanding of what we're seeing and why we're seeing it. So now it's just the changes just come faster. So like this girl I'm working with now, she's coming off like a little knee thing. Man, literally within a month or two. Bill hadn't seen her. He saw her for an eval months ago, and then he hadn't seen her in 2 months. And he's like, she legitimately looks taller, right? Because she just had the extreme like curves everywhere. And so, hey man, good smart training. She looks taller. She's moving better. She feels better. She's distributing forces the way we want. Knee doesn't hurt. Yeah. I mean, look, Bill just gave us the most comprehensive movement model I feel like that's out there. And it's not tethered to anything that's commercially made. You don't have to buy extra stuff. It's just like, no, like this is movement. This is how it happens. This is like pressure and physics and airflow. It's hard to market that. There's not like an after you do this, you have to go buy these 5 things to now use my system. It's just, look, this is how movement works. And so that's why I love it, because it's universally applicable and anybody can use it. You just have to invest a lot of time to really understand it. And you have to rethink a lot of things and probably go through some uncomfortable growth. But I think you said it up top. I know it's a Dan Pfaff quote. If it looks right, it flies right. And you keep coming back to that. And if you can understand that concept and you're willing to take the time, I think most people can figure out most of what Bill's saying. And hey, look, let's just be honest. 70 or 80% of Bill is better than 110% of a lot of the stuff that's out there. So
It is. We're not buying out Amazon Prime's balloons anymore, which is what
I forgot all about that. But yes, yeah. Party City. We had a Party City every month. We had some Party City money coming out of the QuickBooks. So
that's so funny. Okay. Other areas of influence, you've talked about this a lot, the force plates. I think tech it's coming, it's here.
Yeah.
It's helping us make informed decisions with respect to training. Again, it's aligned a lot with what we're seeing with Bill's model. Talk to me about the tech you're using. How are you using it?
Yep. So for right now, the force plates are the big piece, right? And our assessment is pretty stripped down. We do a squat jump, counter movement jump, 2 rebound, CMJ, and then I do some isometric mid-thigh pulls. So pretty standard, pretty basic. But man, you just think about those tests and all the stuff you can pull out of it. Squat jump versus CMJ, you can figure out, okay, is this a force dominant or an elastic dominant creature? The 2 rebound CMJ, okay, well, how are they really what I think they are? Are they the elastic creature I think they are? How does the first jump compare to the second? The asymmetries you can tease out, because I think that's my truest role in this space. I'm not going to work with like 10-year-old little Johnny I'm their first strength coach. That's not really me. And I'm probably not going to get the NBA All-Stars because a lot of them don't see Indianapolis as a thriving hotspot in the summer. But what I get the most of are these people that are like return to play. They maybe had some issues. And I think that's the niche I'm most interested in. So the asymmetry stuff that we can tease out of that. And that's been really illuminating for me, right? Because, left-right asymmetry in a squat jump. Oh, it doesn't look bad. Maybe even a CMJ. Oh, it doesn't look bad. Rebound CMJ. Oh, There it is. Because you can see they push evenly on that first jump, but now you have to land and then reaccelerate and jump maximally again a second time. That's where you start to find some of these hidden monsters, if you will. So I love that. The IMTP or just any sort of slow isometric testing. The great part there is coming back to this idea of basketball players, right? There's no technical element involved, right? Literally set up in this position, pull as hard as you can versus, hey, trap bar deadlift. All right, we got to get your hips down and set your back. Okay, get tight, push. There's such a huge technical element there. It would take months for me to feel comfortable even doing an RM test with an athlete versus an isometric mid thigh pull we can do at day one. So I think that's probably going to evolve. Sorry, if you've seen whatever they call it, the force cube or whatever Hawken is getting ready to come out with. I'd really like to get into more isolated stuff. I could see that IMTP that I'm doing on plates getting probably swapped out for something with that cube. I would love to start doing probably more isolated stuff for quads and like soleus, because I think those are generally weak links. If you look at the research, people that have tendon issues generally have quad and soleus deficiencies. So if I can start to tease that out and have some objective like measures and KPIs. Look, here's arguably the best part. For me, it is more information, right? It's more work too, just for the record. Don't think you're going to buy these things and magically become like the skilled diagnoser / practitioner. Just first off, there's a learning curve. And what I did, I don't know if you want to know this, but instead of the 60 metrics, I stripped it down to 8 to 10. I literally hid all these other scores and measures until I felt like I understood them and knew what to use it for. There's a lot more work. And honestly, if it takes you an hour to do an assessment, now you got another hour on the back end scrolling through force plate data.
At least.
So just understand there's a learning curve involved, and I think it's absolutely worth it. But just respect the fact that you don't get these and magically they're changing outcomes right away. You got to do some work too. But I think long term, the most impactful thing is to be able to show people, okay, you have this knee thing, right? We see it in your posture photos. I see it when you lunge. Now I can see it in this objective measure. So I've got these subjective things that maybe they can't see, right? They don't have the coaching eyes. But 2 data points on a graph. Hey, look, here's your right leg. Here's your left leg. Do you see the problem here? Very clearly, it gives them something that explains maybe why they're having some issues. It gives us some targeted goals and KPIs to measure. And then as you start to narrow that, their confidence grows. Generally, if you're training them well, that should happen anyways, but their training improves. It just gives you something objective to hand off to them and helps explain what you're seeing. Because I've just fallen flat. Again, I've coached 24 years now. There's a lot of times where I see stuff and a normal person doesn't see it. Even if I put it in slow motion on my camera, do you see your? No, not really. Mm-hmm. Okay, but plots on a graph very clearly. Okay, this is something we need to work on. This is something we need to address. So I think that's been the biggest benefit for me. And then on the back end of that, if you have people that want to play at the next level, at least Hawken's been very good with me. They'll share other data sets so I can compare my high school girl against Division I college girls. All right. Hey, here are the outputs we need to have, right? Or, hey, NBA guy, here's how you compare against other NBA guys. And if you see one score, one metric, if breaking's way down here and everything else is elite, okay, this is very clear. This is something we need to address this offseason. And a lot of times they already know this stuff. But again, just kind of like putting more credence into, I think this or I feel this. Okay, absolutely. This is what I'm seeing as well. Let's attack this and see what happens.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts just to sum that up, because one, I feel like you alluded to, it just shines areas on potential blind spots that may be not visible, right? Sometimes speed of movement, just it's hard to pick up these things even with a coaching eye.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that's really valuable that you mentioned is just buy-in from the athletes. We're giving them something they can appreciate, they can see, and I feel like it just paves the way for us to create a lot of these changes in the program that are actually what they need, but maybe at first glance they're not on board with.
Yeah. So it just makes you more targeted. So before, and I'm saying even 10 years ago, we would lump people into Okay, you just have movement deficiencies, so I'm going to put you in a movement bucket, or you're in a strength bucket, or you're in a power bucket, right? However you want to label those, I don't care. But we just had to generalize. Now we can be even more targeted, right? Oh, this person, very clearly, they need braking, or this person needs more elastic work. This person needs more pure strength development, right? You can just be really targeted and really nuanced. I think that's always the goal, right? That's what Bill tries to do all the time when he's got somebody on a table. Hey, instead of training or doing these 5 resets, what if I can give you 1 or 2 that's hyper specific, that cleans up all this stuff? That's what we're trying to do as strength coaches or as sports scientists, whatever we're going to call ourselves in the future. We're just trying to be more targeted, because when people are like, oh, I do, and I'm not going to crap on French contrast training, but just for example, something like French contrast training, or something where you're training all aspects of the force velocity curve. Okay, but how many of those did they actually need? Right? Do they need all 4 of those in sequence, or do they just need a lot of this? And you got a result because you trained some of this, but you also diluted some of your training effect because you did all these other things. Right? So for me, it's always about trying to be as targeted and specific as I can. And I think whenever you have short off seasons or short windows to work with people, that becomes more and more pressing, right? If I have 6 months to train somebody, I can slow cook them. We can touch all the bases, take our time. If I got 3 months with somebody and they're coming, a lot of times if it's a pro, they're coming off something, right? A foot, an ankle, a knee. They've got some sort of issue. So we're like rehabbing / improving movement stuff. Well, now if we've only got 2 months to train, we better be specific and targeted in that time to make sure we maximize kind of our ROI.
Yeah, I love that, because it's the planning fallacy of doing the annual training cycle. It's like now you just have to look for those high leverage points, and you can find them a ton faster because of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge, and I'm such an infant in that game, but it's definitely something I'm passionate about and something I just see. Look, you just can't hide from it. If you're in your 60s and you're on your way out, maybe you don't have to learn it, but if you're in your 40s and lower, like, you need to spend some time understanding this. You may not have to be a world-class sports scientist, but I always think of the overlap, right? If you're a good trainer or coach, you need to know a little bit about physical therapy, a little bit about sports science, a little bit about the skill development side of whatever sport you play. You don't have to be world-class at any of them, but you at least need to be able to have salient conversations with the right people.
Totally. One more thought on this before we start wrapping up. But
yeah,
I've seen some guys fall into this tech craze, and at what point do you think this becomes so excessive that we actually lose touch with coaching and what we're trying to do inside of the weight room? Right? We just get enamored with these metrics and in this data set that we're totally getting away from what we're actually there to do.
Yeah. I think it comes when you're training the data and not the athlete. Like, you see the person that, like, literally the person's over here jumping. They're not even watching the jump. They're just looking at, like, the force trace the whole time. Look, man, the force trace is going to be there, right? That's the value of that. That's why you have it. So you can go back and look at it, because I don't want to try and do that in real time. I'm not good enough yet. So for me, like, I'm watching them jump. I'm recording their jump. I'm hitting the force plate. I'm doing all the things so that I can really get this kind of 30,000-foot view of what's going on. Because maybe you can just see, oh, wow, when I watch them from the front, their right foot and leg collapse when they jump. Or when they land, they're doing this thing and they're shifted to one side. So I think it comes at that point where you're just like burying yourself in the iPad or in your tablet when they're doing the testing. It's like, man, this has gone too far. And I think maybe for some people, that's not a bad thing, right? Like, if you're just a sports scientist and somebody else is doing the coaching, like if you're in this like big ecosystem where you've got people to do all the things, maybe you can be a little bit more like focused on whatever your one thing is. But for people like us, I think it's always going to be athlete centric and athlete focused. And then the data is just there to help reinforce, or maybe, like you said, shine lights on maybe some blind spots. Because, man, I think I'm pretty good at seeing movement, but there's stuff I can't see when somebody's doing a jump. I think one of the things that was most affirming to me was I had this discussion with Lee Taft. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago. I think I was like probably 3 or 4 years into like really just trying to understand speed. I'm like, Lee, dude, how do you do it, man? I'm like, I just don't. I've been doing this 4 years and I feel like I'm so good at watching like squats and deadlifts and slow stuff. And I feel like such an infant. I said, I got to record everything. He's like, Mike, I still record stuff. I still miss stuff. And that was like, oh, really? You know, because we just assume that everybody is so far above us, and not to say Lee wasn't or still isn't, but it was so reaffirming to know, oh, like Lee Taft still records stuff. Bill Hartman will still tell you, I make mistakes, right? Like I don't always get things right on the first intervention, right? You narrow the options and you make better predictions as to what you're going to see, but you still make mistakes. And on a random tangent there, I think that's one of the big things is as a coach, you're going to make mistakes. The goal is to just have more and more experiences and get better at prediction and ultimately come up with better solutions. But yeah, I think to circle back to the very beginning, it becomes when you're so enamored with the data and the tech and all of that that you forget about the actual athlete and human on the other side. Because look, before we had any tech, we got really good outcomes rehabbing and fixing people because we connected with them as humans and we tried to like just take amazing care of them. So I think if you have an athlete-centric approach first, and then you use the data to supplement that and really help drive better decision making, then you can get the best of both worlds.
Take that to the bank all day. All day.
Yeah. Good.
All right, my guy. You're a basketball guy.
Yeah.
Everybody growing up tried some kind of vertical jump hack.
Yeah.
The shoes, other programs. What's the thing you tried?
Man, this is going to be so lame. I didn't really care about jumping until later. I had friends that did the jump soles for sure. My guy, Sean, wore jump soles everywhere for 8 weeks. I don't think it made any improvement in his vertical. No, dude, the only thing that really made a consistent improvement for me, because I went all of high school, I did dumb stuff training in high school. In college, I just led with the rationale of I play all these intramural sports, so I don't need to strength train my legs, which was code for I just do upper body like 3 or 4 days a week. But man, when I got into powerlifting and got serious about strength training, you know, squatting, deadlifting, bench pressing, power cleaning, just training like an athlete, that was the highest I ever jumped. And I was actually pretty close at 5'11" to dunking. I was like 10'6", 10'7". I think you need to be around 10'8", 10'9". So yeah, I could jump off vert, grab the rim, because I also played a lot of volleyball. Here's the best thing. If you want to hack, this is also part of why I got better at jumping. I had the foundational like underpinnings, but I also practiced jumping a lot. Volleyball actually helped a lot with that because I never had to jump that much. Yeah, you jump in basketball and you think about that, but if you're not naturally inclined to that, you don't get enough practice jumping.
Yep.
So when I transitioned to volleyball and I started jumping a lot, that's when my vertical really went up. So I think that's just a great tip. If you want to jump higher, you got to have intentful jumping practice. And so if you could get on a rim that's 9 foot and you can dunk on that, go out and start trying to dunk on that every day or a couple times a week. Left foot, right foot, 2 foot. And then when that's easy, go up to 9-1, 9-2. Like having intent when you jump, I think is super important.
Love it. All right. You are a content machine. I love everything you put out. But if there's somebody who's not familiar with you, what is one recent post or video that you would direct everybody to go watch now?
Dude, I've been so bad about articles, like low key, super, super bad about articles.
Do people stop to read them like they used to?
Do people article anymore? So what I had found towards the end when I was still doing articles was it would be like a paragraph and then like a video and then like another paragraph and then a couple videos highlighting the points, right? Or I got so good at editing them, it was to where you could just read the bolded stuff and get the gist of it. Or you could just read the headlines and get a general idea, because I don't think people really read. Maybe people like you and I read, 40, 45 plus, that like that kind of environment, enjoy that. But I think now it's podcasts and videos. That's why I've skewed so much that way. A couple like foundational ones I'm thinking about energy system stuff these days. I still think you need long duration, low intensity cardio is valuable.
It's a good one.
Now, especially now with everybody talking about zone 2. Just for the record, Joel's been talking about zone 2 for like 15 years. He just calls it cardiac output.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one other one. It's called like widening the aerobic window.
Yes.
I think that's a valuable one too. Just thinking about the aerobic energy system and the value it provides, because I was not of that thinking or in that camp for a long period of time. So Joel really made me think and forced me to get better in that regard. So those would be 2 that I think they're a little bit older, but I still think would provide value for anybody listening.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Are you coaching anything for the kids right now?
So Kendall has graduated away from me.
Oh, no.
In the sense that, yeah, she plays travel soccer now. So she's leveled up there. But I still get my coaching fix with her once or twice a week, depending on the time of year. We do speed camp. So that's where you see some of the random videos. So it's my way of getting her into the gym, but it's not just us.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't feel like I'm telling her what to do. She's around friends. So I still get to do that with her. And that's fun because she's 13. She's at that point where she wants to understand, like, hey, how do I get stronger? How do I build this muscle? So that's been fun. So I can envision more of that because she just seems to enjoy the weight room. I've tried not to push anything on her,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was sports, lifting, any of that. So she's grown to enjoy it on her own. So that's been fun. Something for you to look forward to as well with your younger ones. And then Cade will be starting baseball in like a month. So that's love-hate. He loves it. I don't know if I hate it, but I don't love baseball.
I get it.
Baseball is challenging. The heat, my naturally pasty complexion, I don't do the best in the sun, but I do enjoy it. Like I'm just at that point now where like everything is just movement, right? How does this lateral shuffle apply to this sport? How does this overhead throwing action apply to this different sport? Because he's into baseball and then he's starting to pick up tennis. So that's always fun for me, is like learning about the sport and how to bake what we do into skill development. So that's fun.
So what's next for MR, RTS, iFast?
Yeah. So, okay, let's see. RTS, cert launch in March. I don't know when this will go live. Cert launch in March. I'll reopen the program design mentorship after that. And then I have a complete coach seminar in Chicago in June. So got the trifecta going there. iFast, getting this build out done, hopefully in the next month. And then getting moved in there. So, hey, when all these guys and gals come back, we're stocked up, we're ready to go. And then life, man, hey, got spring sports to look forward to. Kendall's excited to get outside and play soccer. Cade can't wait for baseball. Talked about up top. Little warm weather never hurt anybody. So,
Right.
Yeah, man. A little bit of everything, but yeah, no complaints, man. Life is good, my friend.
I'm so excited to see your spot when it gets finished, because just the videos of the size of that space, I'm like licking my chops. That looks just incredible.
Yeah.
So
I think it's not even any bigger than what we have now. It's just the layout and the design are going to be way better. So yeah, when it's done, man, you got to come through. It's going to be sick.
I'll be out there. Mike, it's been an honor, man. Thanks for carving the time for me. I know we went well over an hour.
Of course.
I'll share the videos, your podcast, ton of your content. I'm a huge fan.
Perfect.
But man, in the meantime, take care, and let's try to do this again sometime.
Anytime, man. Thanks, brother.
If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to rate and review us with 5 stars only. Then subscribe so you can get all the latest updates.